As we know, the global shift towards carbon neutrality accelerates. India must chart its own path, one that reflects our diverse mobility needs, economic realities, and infrastructure constraints. While BEVs are gaining ground, hybrids, biofuels, flex fuels, hydrogen, and advanced ICE vehicles will remain an integral part of our journey. India may be the last major ICE market standing, but that's a strategic advantage. It's an opportunity to lead in multi-powertrain innovation, deepen localization, and position India as a global hub for future-ready mobility. It is my pleasure to discuss this and more with our eminent panelists. To begin with, there's a lot of conversation about when does the world move towards a complete EV. But we've understood with the transition around the world that it is going to be a long road ahead. To understand from each of our panelists as to how do they really view the powertrain landscape, and when they look at 2030, 2035 horizon, how do they see the fuel mix for various powertrains? I will begin with Mr. Gulati as to, in your assessment, Toyota globally has been, captain in hybrids, but there is a big shift towards EVs as well. And there are other powertrains that are there in the marketplace. So when you look at the future, the next decade, for the global automotive industry and the Indian automotive industry specifically, how do you see this shift and the transition?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and good morning to all. You see, what we're seeing in the recent past is a very interesting trend in terms of technologies. That's shaped by many factors. For instance, 2024 saw continued growth of electrified technologies, but there was interesting trends in terms of salient feature being that the trend is towards all electrified technologies. For example, in EU, the market actually degrew for electrics and plug-in hybrids, grew significantly for hybrids. This has geopolitical issues to it. In China, the fastest growing technology currently happens to be PHEV. The growth globally, if you look at it, the growth of hybrids strong hybrids was around 27%, that of electrics was 25%, but PHEVs was 60%. And primarily driven by China, because if you look at the total number of electric vehicles sold last year, out of 82 million new car sales, 11 was around battery electric, and out of that, 6.7 came from China. 6 million PHEVs sold, 4.5 came from China. So there is clear trend globally in terms of shifting towards electrification, but there is also a geographical diversity in how the markets are moving. Now, these are traditionally big markets, but if you look at how the global south is moving, if you look at, for example, Latin America, Brazil, clearly moving towards biofuels. If you look at Southeast Asia, the shift again is towards sustainability, but the offtake of, let's say, the strong hybrids and PHEVs is much more aggressive. As far as the takeaway for this, the takeaway really is ultimately it's all the stakeholders who have to be addressed in terms of an energy or a technology transition. Customer is going to be critical, no doubt about it. The infrastructure will have a role to play. Each market is unique. Each market has its own strengths, its own uniqueness. For example, in India, the demographics of our country are very diverse from that of Europe. The infrastructure readiness is very different. Our challenges are very different. But key goal, I think, across all markets is towards shifting away from fossil fuels, towards sustainability, greater focus in terms of looking at real deliverables. Talking more about well-to-wheel rather than, just tailpipe. A lot of talk about now life cycle with recycling coming in. Now, with all of this happening, how we see going ahead is clearly there is going to be shift towards sustainable technologies, but it's going to be a multiple technology path forward, with the mix being very diverse for different markets, depending upon their unique context and the customer acceptance.
What's your assessment of India? What is the kind of mix do you anticipate?
Well, if you look at India last year, the EVs were at around 2.1, 2.2% or thereabouts, 2.3%, and hybrids, strong hybrids were around something similar. The EVs are picking up. The number of products that are coming into the market is increasing. The model availability is also becoming better. There are very good products that are coming out there with good choices. Going forward, I believe in India, it's going to be a very diverse future with alternate fuels playing also a very big role in addition to electrification. So, ethanol, already we are there for E20, which means 20% of the gasoline is knocked off the table. Looking at flexi-fuel vehicles, and I think all major auto manufacturers had shown flexi-fuel vehicles in the recently concluded Auto Expo. Flexi-fuels is going to be important. Gas is going to be important. CNG, especially when it starts combining with CBG, etc. So going forward, by 2030, I feel in India it's going to be a healthy mix of electrified, meaning electric and strong hybrid, with probably some element of PHEVs also coming in. Some OEMs are announcing that. But a bigger role for alternate fuels vis-a-vis ethanol in flexi fuels, CNG also playing a role, and I think petrol and diesel is going to be around.
So cleaner alternatives emerging, however, ICE is going to have a much stronger contribution. Mr. Hazela, Stellantis has base in Europe, in North America, and we are seeing in both these countries or region, the transition is rather up-down. So when you look at the progress that is taking place at the world stage, and when you translate that to Indian market, given our own unique factors, how do you see the global shift impacting, or just like how Minister also mentioned that we got to look at our own path. So how do you see the transition?
Yeah, thanks, Ketan. First of all, good morning, and thanks for reading my citation twice. So thank you. Sorry about it. I would say, and I agree with Vikram, that every of this transition is going to have its own pace. And we are going to see, which I call it as engineer's challenge, to continue to live with multi-energy platforms. And that is going to be there for long, because there are policies which are shifting and which leads to adoption in different country at different level, different speed. And if we divide north versus south hemisphere, the north is going to be faster adopting to EV versus south, which will be like flex fuel, ICE, which includes petrol, diesel, hydrogen, all will coexist in the southern hemisphere. And that's what is going to be our opportunity, I would say, because India would be the last country standing when it comes to ICE, and we will be the last producer, including Tamil Nadu, should be the last one to produce the last ICE in India. So this would be, I would say, a real challenge for us to deal as automaker, that how do we create value for customer, not overburdening with the complexity which we have internally, and that's going to be the real balance which we need to do.
Right, Stellantis continues to export gearboxes and engines to Stellantis Global.
So yes, and that is in Tamil Nadu,
yeah.
300,000 engine, 300,000 transmission, we do export every year. And Stellantis, the Hosur plant will be the last plant standing in within
That's great
us.
to hear. Mr. Mani, from a commercial vehicle standpoint, the pathway is definitely very different. While on passenger vehicle, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, one knows that shift is going to be swift when it comes to electrification. But what's the right path? And what, in your assessment, where India can actually lead the global stage?
Thanks, Ketan. Thanks for having me here. Good morning, everyone. So commercial segment is pretty exciting field to work with. When you talk about, the kind of freight or the tonnage which you have to travel across, it's currently around 4.6 billion tons of, per year, to maybe perhaps 9.6 trillion tons by 2050. So this is going to grow. So with so much of macroeconomic factors, technological tsunamis which has been coming across, also a lot of regulations, obviously a single technology will not take a lead path and start working towards it. So when you gave this question to me, I immediately could think about an analogy of how does it happen globally, and as well as more specifically India, which is where we are all talking about today. While certain countries are very specific right from the beginning, where road transportation has become always one of the, for example, US has always been more than 1,000 kilometers of freights are moved, not too much dependent on rails. Still, they are still working with diesel, has always been directionally doing towards. Europe has been taking a little slowdown, as Minister also talked about. China is one exception, probably we can learn from how things have been moving across. So all these learnings can actually be flow back into our system. So the analogy which I was thinking about is something like a horse race which happens, wherein horse being multiple fuels. So instead of being only a diesel and also maybe perhaps CNG, now we've got an EV which is big one. In between, LNG has pitched in, hydrogen ice, and there's also hydrogen fuel cells. It's a packed ground. So in Chennai, we got a very nice race ground, so you can always have all these things visible here. Having said that, the jockey, the OEMs and also the regulatory authorities, including Government of India, all the other people, they also play a very big role in how this is going to happen. And third is also the food and diet, wherein the R&D, innovation, the manufacturing capabilities also will have to play a very big role. But also the playing ground, because commercial vehicle is not about only road transportation alone. There are a lot of minings and all the other stuffs comes into picture. How does this technology play a big role into that? And sometimes the weather also play a very different role. Weather comes in terms of ecosystems and all the other things put together. So having done that, so what matters here is perhaps which one is going to take a big lead in this, and that day how this is going to happen. But at the end of the day, there is one person who is sitting on the side who put money on the horse, who is sitting on the sides of the customers, who only think about the cost of operation, TCO, which plays a predominant role for the last many years. In India, fortunately, Indian OEMs have been doing extremely well, and Ashok Leyland has always been pioneer in bringing up all those areas in multi-technologies, so keeping ourselves ready. The customers do not want only a horse which is just putting his nose front. It's also miles ahead of all the other things put together. So we need to really play around these areas as to how we are going to do, and also there is a dark horse, still something would come and go on. The most important thing is about the sustainability perspective. Diesel is going to stay, I strongly believe. With after Euro 6 anyway, diesel is almost equivalent to petrol. Euro 7 and all the other comes into picture. It cannot be ruled out from cleaner fuel perspective, and which is a very bread and butter of this area. So if you want to think about moving on to CNG, and also LNG, which is also government focus. Of course, what the important thing is about the ecosystem, wherein 70,000 fuel stations to close to 7,000 right now from CNG to less than 15 LNG. So all these things have to really gear up to that extent. So if these things are coming up with the government support, I think probably these can also take a big role in this. EV has always been one of the important factors which comes into picture. I'm sure it's going to take a play, but not like a past cars wherein you just work on wherever it is possible. It's the variability is much lower. But for a company which starts from 2 tons to a level of 55 tons, our range of products are around 1,450 unique products which is coming out.
Insane, yeah.
How all these things can play a role in EV is a big question mark. Right now, we can see huge, in terms of last mile connectivity, a large amount of say, and also in terms of ICV, which is a medium ton, 14 to 19 tonners, and also a very big play in 55 tonners and above. And apart from that, a lot of specific areas where these things are happening.
So which is what Mr. Hazela mentioned, it's like an engineer's challenge. You
Absolutely.
have to work with multiple pathways. While the pathway is multiple pathway, what's the North Star from a commercial vehicle standpoint? We know that two-wheelers, three-wheelers are going to converge towards EVs. Even electric cars are going to be eventually the eventual future. But from a commercial vehicle standpoint, how do you reach that? What's the North Star for CVs?
So I believe even if you assume the buses perspective, it is going to be only 30% by 2030. And with just government also started putting some money on e-trucks of 500 crores, probably it's a long way to go as far as all the other things are coming out. But I think diesel is going to continue to play a very big role at least 2035 and so on. and followed by rest of all the other things based on all the other infrastructures, how is it coming up, and how the charging is coming up. So EV is not like you also have to carry loads along with the battery weight. So how does this going to play a role? How
So
the
hydrogen,
range comes into
do
picture?
you think hydrogen is the potential North Star there? I mean, how do you see that?
So the bloodline and the breed of hydrogen horse is depending on the announcement of how it's going to match quickly the price of the diesel
Right.
at certain point of time, how these things getting
Okay.
bridged, and that's how things are,
Right.
in all these areas where the cost differential is the one is going to play a big role. And each one of us have been working around along with, multiple channel partners. And whatever the ecosystem and also sustainability comes into picture, it will be very interesting to see going forward. Yeah.
Right. Mr. Murugappan, if I could get your views, the three-wheelers have really taken off on a very strong footing. Almost a third of the market is right now electric vehicles. When you look at the future of powertrains, what do you think is the right path? And, you are a key stakeholder in the state as well. I mean, how have you seen various regions behaving? I mean, and what role do you think the government also can play in terms of transitioning faster?
Yeah, so Tamil Nadu already had a good base for the auto industry. And so today they're a powerhouse for the EV network. Like the first EV policy was in 2016, and then they came out with another one in 2023, which is very encouraging actually. They basically want to transform the state into a preferred destination for EV. And they've set up EV parks around Tamil Nadu. There are 3 of them actually, and they plan to redevelop about 6 cities in TN for implementing e-mobility solutions. This policy is for both, for manufacturing as well as for service providers. With this, the state aims to secure over 50,000 crores in investment and probably be valued, the EV business valued at 40 billion in 2030. So coming from our side, we have 4 platforms. We have a tractor, e-tractor, we have the e-3-wheeler, the cargo and the auto. We have the e-SCV and the e-heavy commercial vehicle. Out of these 4 factories, 3 are in Chennai. So thanks to the proactive policies of the government, that 3 of our factories are in Chennai, and 1 was a startup in Manesa, so that is there. So coming to your question, what can the government do to encourage the EV growth? Is that, if I get the question right. So why, India is a very price-sensitive market. Why should people move to EV from whatever they already have, right? So that's where the government comes in. One is, of course, policy. We expect the 3-wheeler to have a 70% adoption by 2030. But the others, I don't think it will be more than 20-25% adoption in this thing. So also, 42 of the 50 most polluted cities are in India. I think that's a good reason to become, move into EV and for the government to actually push for EV, this thing. So for that, they should actually, at the moment, the people should, some subsidy is given, but it's not given to HCVs or SCVs. It's still all tractors. It's only in the 3-wheeler category that they are giving the PME drive subsidies. What I'm saying is for the initial cost is high. Then after the first 5 years, then you actually realize the profit of owning an EV. Okay? The running cost is much low. So for people so you must give subsidy in the beginning, and then maybe you can withdraw it after some time.
So you feel that subsidy is needed for a prolonged period of time, especially in the different segments of the commercial vehicle sector?
Right. So the subsidy will play a big part in encouraging initial stages, and then it can be withdrawn.
Right.
Also, there are lots, the charging infrastructure also has to take place. So the main thing today is India, in terms of charging infrastructure, is not there yet. So there's a long way to go. So maybe develop charging infrastructure, like in the highways, give land, things like that. So I think the government plays a big part in converting.
So support is needed for a prolonged period of time is what you're saying, right? Mr. Petkar, Tata Motors, from an electrification standpoint, did a fantastic job and has driven the car market. But from a commercial vehicle standpoint also, there are multiple powertrains that Tata Motors offers. Now, looking at it from a future and where do you put your money in? Does it become too difficult to focus on one technology, or just like how Mr. Hazela mentioned that you got to have, this is an engineer's conundrum and you have to deal with each one of them at the same time, ensure that it comes to consumer at the right price?
Yeah, so thank you, Ketan. First of all, I would like to compliment Autocar Professional for actually hosting this kind of a conference on the broader subject of a powertrain. Normally these days the conferences are about the EV
Thank you, sir.
and net zero and sustainability, but the conventional powertrains less often spoken. And every day when you open the newspaper, there is not a single day where there is no news related to the EVs. So first of all, my big compliments and thanks for hosting this kind of a conference. I think coming to your point about, how does a company like, say, Tata Motor, that we do the investment for the development and the growth of the vehicles and the powertrains. It's not an easy act, let me say. It's a very, very tight balancing that we need to do. If you look at what Tata Motor has offered in the past, let's say 4 to 5 years, we are there in every of the powertrain. We are there not just in the conventional, let's say the liquid fuels or the fuel blends, but also in the CNG, LNG. We are also there in the battery electric vehicle, and we are also there in the hydrogen.
Right.
And in the hydrogen, we are there in both the hydrogen fuel cell as well as the H2Is. So being a largest player, it is imperative for us to be there. And some of the new technologies, they have a long gestation period, long development cycle. And therefore, unless you really work on the core technology development, you would not be ready when the market actually is in the need of such technology. So for us, it's, I would say, almost a daily work. We call, daily work management, DWM. So the product strategy and the product planning is actually the essence. And unless you are able to think, what the consumer is going to require in the time to come, you cannot actually make, the robust development strategy. Having said that, I think what are the imperatives? The imperatives are very clear. I think one is what is the national goal? And national goal is all about, the transition to the net zero. But someone may say it is 2070, why to break head today, right?
Right.
But talking about Tata Motor, we have taken a target that we will actually reach as an organization on the passenger vehicle side by 2040 and on the commercial vehicle by 2045. So that actually sets a sort of a quote-unquote a North Star that we would like to reach regardless of the country wanting to transit 2070. So that's the point number one. The point number two, if you look at what is in the mind of the policymakers, what's in the mind of the government, and it's actually very clear. I mean, it doesn't take too much for us to really understand. I think the government is pushing on all kinds of the fuel technologies. You name it, I mean, the gasoline, who thought 5 years back that we would reach a 20% penetration of ethanol? It used to be less than 5% 5 years back.
Right.
And similarly, the talk about, the methanol, DME, and now the transition toward the LNG, and the dedicated corridors which are coming up as far as the LNG infrastructure is concerned, and the kind of a plan the government has in terms of actually ramping up the distribution of a CNG, I mean, number of the gas stations. And not to mention about the EV. I think EV, it is very clear story that government would continue to like to back the EV technology for a number of reasons. I think my co-panelist already said about, that the India, how we have so many polluted cities, as a part of the India. And therefore, there is a dire need to look at, how to go for a zero emission technology. So I think if you look at and take a peep into the government, the policymaker perspective, and the fact that the India continues to import more than 85% of the crude, there is a larger need for actually doing the balancing act in terms of how to contain the foreign outgo, the forex outgo, and also how to broad base the energy basket and how to actually reduce the reliance. as far as the energy is concerned to the countries and especially in the wake of the geopolitical situation.
Right.
So this is the second aspect. So net zero first, government policy, the perspective. And the third and the pretty important is about what the consumer wants. I mean, we may say we would like to work on this and that, but eventually it is all about the consumer preference.
Right.
And different categories of the vehicle, they have different, the attributes, what the consumer would like, to get out of a mobility solution. So therefore, for R&D and for the companies like us, it's not easy. I mean, we have to dynamically look at, how is the evolving, let's say the global trends, the global perspectives, and then, the sky is the limit as far as the technology development is concerned. You can actually keep pumping in more and more money. But you need to do that in a very, very sensible manner at the right time so that, you are able to also monetize the investment that you make.
Right.
And especially in India with such a strong regulatory regime, it has become quite difficult.
Right.
Let me say in terms of, with the quick transition from BS4 to BS6, phase 1 to phase 2. Now we are talking about CAFE, we are talking about WLTP. So many things we are talking nowadays, right? And therefore, are we in a position to really recover the investment that we are making? It's a big question.
Right.
And therefore, there is no simple answer, as to how we do the balancing act, but it's a daily work management.
Right, right. So you have got to be quick, nimble, and evolve according to the market dynamics. Mr. Velusamy, Mahindra and Mahindra did a fabulous job of coming out with a skateboard electric in a extremely short time of 3 years. And, we're talking about, evolving strategy in a short span of time. But you are also a predominant diesel-driven SUV specialist in a market. And with the direction of future, when you look at CAFE or when you look at the ethanol mix increasing, how do you see the powertrain landscape from Mahindra and Mahindra standpoint? And with such a diversity at play, with every individual company having its own path to how they're going to be catering to their future requirement, how can a company like Mahindra lead?
So thank you, Ketan, and thank you, panelists, and good morning. I'm not sure the title is Future Powertrain, because that's a classical current powertrain, and we are moving to future energy source.
Right.
Before I answer about what Mahindra is going to do, Mahindra will be doing it, just a view of what's happening in the world. It's not a single powertrain that's ruling the world right now. It's a heterogeneous marketplace that you see it. Out of the 75 million cars sold in 2024 calendar year, if you look at China is about 22.9 million passenger cars. I'm not including the trucks, but the trucks is another story. There it is about 49.8 or so percent. I'm not so precise, but it's around the number that I remember. Is about, that's consisting of battery electric vehicles plus hybrids. Hybrids include the range extender plus the plug-in hybrids plus the strong hybrids. Out of this, let's say 50%, 25% is battery electric vehicles.
Right.
That's an incredible story starting with 2018, 2019. In 5-6 years, China has reached 25% of the overall. 1 quarter is clearly it is telling something to us. The story is evolving. If you see 50% of the sold vehicles are either plug-in hybrids or range extenders and battery electric vehicles, but not ICE, pure ICE vehicles. That's a big story to watch. Coming to Europe, if you look at what they have done it in 2024, out of the 10.7 for the European Union or for Europe, 13 million for the Europe as a country, 54% is strong hybrid, plug-in hybrids, and there is no range extender there, very small.
Right.
But the ICE is about 45%. Out of the ICE, 45% gasoline is 33%, and diesel is pure diesel is 12%. So 45% is the ICE story there.
Right.
Very similar to China, but in China it is close to 25% is battery electric vehicle,
Right.
whereas in Europe it is only 13.7% battery electric vehicle, just
Right.
roughly half of that.
Right.
Moving to US, if you go to, Out of the, I mean, you have a passenger vehicles of 3 million and then pickup trucks of 12.7 million pickup trucks. Total 15.7 million vehicles sold. The 20% is the battery electric vehicle plus the hybrid vehicles.
Right.
Out of that, only battery electric vehicle is 8%. So we are talking about in the US 8%. In the Europe, we are talking
30%.
about 14%, and here is 25%.
25.
That's on the rise. In the US, 80% is the ICE vehicles. Now coming to India, if you look at it, out of the 4.36 million vehicles sold in the 2024, we are talking about 2% hybrid and roughly 3% electric. 2% means about 80,000 all.
Yeah.
And Vikram Gulati will be very happy to know that he is the main seller of hybrid. The electric is on the rise for last 3 months. Consistently, it is over 3%. And then the remaining 94%, we are talking about ICE vehicles, pure gasoline. Particularly point to note is we are talking about 16.4, 16.5% of CNG vehicles.
Right.
So India is a different story,
Right.
multi-fuel story.
Right.
Do you focus on diesel? Do you focus on gasoline? Do you focus on battery electric vehicle? Do you focus on strong hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or the range extender, or the CNG, or the ethanol? Where do you focus?
Right.
It's very clear. We have signed a contract in 2015. All of us as a countries, we have signed a contract for zero CO2 emissions, correct? From the transportation sector, at least from 2040 or 2050.
Yeah.
But the worldwide, the Europe has taken the target from 2035, they will make it zero, but maybe delayed by 3-4 years. Which means you have to move away from ICE vehicles.
Right.
It's a big challenge given to the engineers of this country. The second is, if you see all the consumers from the cities, they're all complaining about the city congestion, the climate changes plus the pollutions. City after city is going to the court and the court is mandating something. Petkar mentioned about the 85% of the import bill that is coming.
Yeah.
Somebody says if you develop the battery electric vehicles, you are still importing the lithium. One difference is the more you import the lithium, the more resources you are importing, you can 98% you can recover it back, not the. So for us, therefore, it is quite clear, battery electric vehicle is the long-term goal.
That's a North Star.
North Star, and we have to go via this. Now, short and medium term can be range extender and can be a strong hybrids, but a diesel. Diesel is a very, very good contender in terms of the fuel efficiency. I mean, after the BS 6.2, you still have excellent emission levels coming out of that, and the CO2 norms coming out of that. Nearly coming to the values of the yield. Also depends on the in the segment where A, B, C, D, E segments, D and E segments are really. Yeah. And the commercial industry will have to live with the diesel engines for quite some time before an alternate powertrain takes place. So for us, the focus of being an SUV player and a small truck player, our focus has been in the EV because that's what we want to pivot it to. In the short and medium run, we have been in the gasoline vehicles and the diesel vehicles, which we will continue to focus on. But all of us have to focus and get the EV going.
Right.
Because that is for our mother nature and for our children.
Right. You gave a nice recap of how the world is evolving. And each region has its own policy roadmap. Internal per capita is very different. The buying behavior, driving habits are very different. Now, is there a need for India to look at a reference point? China, you mentioned, is one of the markets where there was a sharp focus towards electrification. Europe is behaving in a certain way. And in US, Donald Trump is asking to produce more oil. So does India take the global market as a reference point, or we got to create our own reference point? What is the suggestion that you would give to policymakers, given the fact that eventual North Star is ICE? Along the way, we're going to see significant contribution from ICE vehicles. So how do you see, how would you want the government, state government or central government to curate their policy for future towards powertrains?
I think the state and central governments are doing fantastic job when it comes to EV and also shaping the future. You can't be having a funnel of various powertrains and then aiming to become a North Star unless you focus very heavily like the different regions that we have explained. One very, very important thing is the stability of the policy that the central government is having for the 5% GST for the electric vehicles. We request that they should continue and focus on that EV, correct? Making it affordable. Every technology takes time to get it affordable. Second is the state governments, some of the state governments recently announced the road taxes on the EVs. I would request, I'm very happy to note and congratulate on Tamil Nadu government, they have not brought a proposal on the road tax on the EVs. There's some state governments who have announced the road tax. I think really they should withhold that tax implementation from 1st April because we have 3% electric, unlike 25% in China and then 14% in Europe. You should allow this young bubbling seed to come like a small plant and then it can grow tree, right? You cannot kill it at the bud. So those stability has to be there because we take 3 years to develop the vehicle and then put a lot of investments, hoping whatever policies were there 3 years before. And therefore that stability is a more important thing.
So extend the lower tax structure for EVs for a longer period of time. How long do you think the government should support with a lower tax structure and what more would you expect from the government?
If your goal is to go to electric, focus on that. I mean, 3 years before you said our goal is go to electric. Now you have to find ways and means and keep your constancy of regulations to keep the electric moving forward. If you do something in between and then it disturbs the rhythm, you are not going to get back to the electric.
Right.
And at the end of the day, where look at the China, the speed at which it's going. Look at the flexibility that it brings in. The electric vehicle brings a lot of software, and it is an added advantage for India.
Right.
When you bring in the software content into the vehicle cells, bill of material, it's a huge job opportunities, and it's an addition. You will become the #1 player in the world in quick time with the software. And second is, most of the time the electric vehicles are sold because of not for electric vehicles alone, but for the technologies coming along with the electric vehicles. Whether it is an autopilot or it is the technologies that you see it in most of the Chinese vehicles. It is the technology development that gives a lot of new lives to the automotive engineers and jobs. And that we shouldn't forget about that.
Right. Mr. Petkar, you constantly engage with the government authorities, and given the wide spectrum of portfolio that Tata Motors has, right from a small commercial vehicle, passenger vehicle to a large truck, what are the 2 or 3 key things that you would want Indian government or state governments to prioritize in order to have a smoother path for more customer acceptance and business viability?
Yeah, so I think this is a good question, Ketan. But if we really have to answer, we need to look at it, from the segment point of view. So which segment of a transport sector that we are talking? So if I look at the last mile mobility and the passenger car, I think clearly the focus is going to be on the zero emission technology, which is the battery electric vehicle technology. So whatever comes in the way to promote and develop the battery electric vehicle technology is something that we would go for. We would seek, all kinds of support, be it in the form of continuation of the GST regime, reduction in the custom duty structure for some of the imported items, and also more robust, let's say the auto PLI and the phase manufacturing plan to continue. If we talk about the, let's say the heavy commercial vehicles, and then I will come lastly to the intermediate category vehicle. If I talk about the heavy commercial vehicle, which are like used for the purpose of the haulage, long distance travel, goods carriage, freight movement, then and looking at, where the country need to migrate in terms of a zero emission regime, the destination is, of course, going to be reached with the hydrogen, because the conventional battery technology, they do have a limitation when it comes to the application on the freight movement. In terms of either it's a dead weight, reduction in the payload, you have a long, time to charge the batteries.
So from MCV to HCV.
Yeah, so from the MCV to HCV, that's where as a destination, we would look at the hydrogen as a possibly a viable solution.
And what would you want government to do there?
Yeah, so there, in terms of, there are already a couple of policies which the government has announced, but I think what we need to see there is a more investment that must happen more encouragement in terms of, let's say, the local manufacturing of the electrolyzers, the pricing structure as far as the hydrogen is concerned, something similar to what has been done, the Auto PLI for the battery electric vehicle.
Right.
Same thing, though it is there for the hydrogen fuel cell, but it is not yet there for the H2ICE.
Right.
So H2ICE technology also should be given the same stature like what it is for the fuel cell. And not to forget about the LNG, because LNG is also clean burning fuel, and especially for the long haulage, where you need to actually travel more than 1,000 kilometers in a trip, right? And it can go up to 1,500 kilometers also. The LNG is a very viable option, and the LNG price structure today is very nice. 75 rupees a kg of a LNG is a good thing. But then the penetration, if we have to increase, looking at both the viability from the transporter's point of view, it's actually at a sweet spot, right? But still, the growth of the LNG is not at a pace at which, even in China, that it has happened.
Right.
So there again, what can be done by the government is to basically look at to maintain, let's say, the price of the LNG at what it is, right? I mean,
So have a tap on the price for
yeah,
LNGs.
so that is number one. Number two, there is no GST benefit for the LNG.
Right.
Right, so the GST is at the same rate like a diesel. This being the clean burning fuel,
Right.
there is a sort of a need to look at whether the GST can be at least at the intermediate level, if not like close to the battery electric vehicle. And thirdly, I think if there can be a focus on a dedicated LNG corridor, that means because you can't actually spread the LNG infrastructure all over the country, right? So therefore, you identify long haul, long route dedicated corridors where you can actually go for the installation of the LNG stations. Right. And then promote, of course, the local manufacturing of the cryogenic tanks and that kind of a technology. So I would say, on the heavy commercial vehicle side, look at LNG and also look at what can be done more on the hydrogen side.
Right.
Now come to the intermediate category, which is, let's say, between 7 ton to, let's say, the 19 ton category of the vehicle. Actually, it is falling between the two, right?
Right.
So it falls on the battery electric vehicle side, especially you take the case of buses.
Yeah.
Mr. Mani spoke about the buses, and there you have, right, I mean, government is quite active, want to pursue the electrification agenda, and there is a huge potential because, so many lakhs and lakhs of the buses, which are actually currently the fleet which is aging, requires modernization.
Right.
And that is where government is wanting us to actually migrate to e-buses. We fully support that. And in fact, we have the largest bus fleet today operating as a battery electric vehicle buses. So that is on one hand. On the other hand, then you have the CNG, stroke LNG, which are more like for the 19-ton category vehicle. It would take some time for them to go for the hydrogen. So I think the intermediate category vehicle would actually get saddled between the battery electric and the CNG stroke LNG, is what I would think. But not to forget, diesel will continue to rule the roost.
Absolutely.
Okay, because that is a workhorse and it's a dependable workhorse.
Probably we'll have to make them more cleaner.
So we will, I mean, there is a roadmap, of course, through the emission transition, it would happen.
Right. Mr. Murugappan, what do you think? You spoke about infrastructure earlier. So from a government standpoint, beyond infrastructure, what is it that you'd expect?
Well, beyond in terms of incentive and stuff like there are states already that have implemented something like if you manufacture and register the vehicle in the same state, then you can get some kind of an incentive back. Yeah, not like if you manufacture and sell it some other country, but if you sell it in the same state, you get the same. So that could be some kinds of encouragement for SCV.
Local support.
So I think government plays a big part in this promotion of electrifying this thing, and it's not simple. As like I said, the initial cost is expensive. So why would someone want to move to an electric?
Right.
So going forward, I think we need a lot of work from the government side, and also the scrapping policy. Like whatever is scrap can be replaced by
electric vehicle. You get
also,
better benefit there.
Yeah, and like within cities also, like all the delivery, the last mile deliveries, like Amazon or Swiggy or stuff, can all be electrified. So that can make the city a better place and less polluted.
Right. Mr. Mani, what policy suggestions you may have for center or state, given the wide gamut of technology that a commercial vehicle maker has to deal with?
Yeah. So a lot has been talked by Petkar, but let me just add on something more to it. So like
Three things that you would want.
absolutely. So 12% of CO2 is coming from automotive sector. We need to bring it to zero. That's a larger game by 2050 or 2060, whatever it is. Each and every company has got its own policy. By 100th year, we like to make it a carbon-free company. So by default, we are also moving towards. But what I learned from recent concluded Champions Trophy is that if middle games, if the game is played very well,
Right.
end games become insignificant. That's what I'm seeing off late the cricket is actually moving towards. So this plays a very crucial role.
The bridge, the path.
The bridging the path. You know that your North Star may perhaps still is a EV or a hydrogen. While you start developing the entire ecosystem to begin with, kind of a ports or certain hubs, long hauls, a complete ecosystem ready so that we push the people to do it. For example, technologically we are all ready. So our fuel cell vehicle, hydrogen fuel cell vehicle is running in Leh Ladakh for the last 1.5 years, 11,000 feet, absolutely no issues. There are hydrogen ICE vehicles are running in a particular hub in itself where hydrogen itself is actually being done by their own ecosystem. So these technologies are already ready with this. EV is, of course, it's a known story for everyone. So how we are going to make it, India is such a diverse, a vast countries, quickly identify 2030 corridors are coming up. Let's just start announcing that this area belongs to this. And you start pumping money on that.
So look at a cluster approach is what you're saying?
Absolutely. I think this is what we need to really move towards. And that's what China has also been doing it. So, it's not that they've actually made so much of penetration down to EV alone in this area. LNG has actually picked up very well there. Battery swapping technology, they have actually started exploring in a much more bigger way. So when you wanted to carry a lesser load, for every 100 kilometers, if the swap cells come into picture, probably we can also start working towards this direction. So what we need from the government is that identify, talk to us, and make into cluster. Let's start focusing on all those areas so that everybody starts working towards. That's point number one. Point number two is currently structure is close to 3.5 times to 4 times cost difference between an EV and also a traditional ICE. While we start working towards ICE in terms of not only diesel or cleaner fuel, it's also about fuel efficiency. What our vehicles are running the last 5 years back or 10 years back and now, a lot of focus has been coming across this area. The customer also has been demanding on that. Connected technology is actually helping us to have much more larger load to create. All these things are actually getting into our own, direction, not towards making a zero emission also. So all these things are working towards this direction. But perhaps what is required is that how do we really bridge these two gaps? The industry like Tamil Nadu has always been pioneer. Now a lot of other states are also catching up. Very quickly seeing one to the other, copy and paste and a little bit add on. So all those things, this competition will also help us to make our own ecosystems getting ready, because that is now the time where we started investing on our own, the entire ecosystems of EVs as well. We're going forward hydrogen fuel cell as well. Hydrogen ICE is always an existing system, can always be upgraded into. Most of our vendor systems who are already there, whatever the ingredient components are, need a like plus alpha changes only to move on to hydrogen ICE. So keeping all these things put together and how far, you are encouraging our system to move ahead. For example, EPM bus drive has been one of the impetus to really move the direction of 36,000 buses for the next few years. Bus market is looking to be good. We are world's fourth largest bus manufacturers. Maybe perhaps we may not be first, at least couple of two in bus manufacturing itself to start off with. Last mile connectivity with multimodal facility out there, how we are going to incentivize, that aspect is important. How you are going to bridge these two gaps in terms of availability is very important as far as commercial sector is concerned. Unless you do, then again with larger activities will keep on moving. All the horses will go one down south and north. It's actually difficult for holistically, it's going to be a cost cutting for all of us.
So managing the middle innings is going to be...
It's going to be a major most role to really play. And that's what I think, I really appreciate. You got only 2 fuel, system. You have multiple fuel, not only for electrification, also petrol. You should also have LNG, fuel pump also should be in your logo. Maybe hydrogen also, maybe, a couple of more should come into picture. Thank you.
Right. Any suggestions, Mr. Hazela? I mean, what 2 or 3 key points you would want government to focus on in terms of policy imperative?
Yeah, I would say there are 3 aspects. One is, as a customer, we have always range anxiety. Today, if you see EV penetration, it has happened mostly in cities or area which is controlled by the driver and the charging point. They always have this in mind. So can we start looking at where every fifth house can be a charging point? That's the kind of policy which we need to look at it, because if we have taken a decision that we will move to EV, these are the things which we need to start working now.
Incentivize charging infra.
Incentivize so that people become part of this movement, not just become a burden.
Right.
That's what we need to do when it comes to the charging. Second important thing is the cost of EV vehicle is very high, and customer doesn't just want to have a natural choice. Today, we are more on adoption of technology from outside rather than creating. So how can we start working with university, working with research, working with industry together so that we use local infrastructure, because we talk about self-reliance. Right. If we don't use the local minerals which are available, let's say sodium and iron, which is
so local sourcing, local charging infra?
Local material which is minerals available, develop technology around it, use it in the vehicle so that we become self-reliant, and promote those kind of technology, because like Minister said, it's 5 times good to fail and have one success. That's going to lead the world. Right. I would say that's the second. To me, the third important point is also look at the people who are servicing today all our cars, not only at service station, which are very, very privileged one, but roadside, in the small villages. How do we upgrade them? How do we upskill them? Because today, the way EV is handled, it is not known to many of the people. Right. They don't know. And this is where a government initiative working with OEMs has to promote, not only at the, I would say, college level, but it has to go to ITI level, it has to go to the roadside mechanic level, where they can also upgrade, and we uplift entire society. Yeah. And when we travel to those places, we feel, koi hai na. Right. There is somebody who will repair our car if we need one. Right. And not depending upon RSA. Right. Today, RSA business is growing because we have good, but we need to start looking at these. So to me, 3 are the initiative where government and industry should work. One is how can we have 1 every 5 house becoming a charge point. Second is how do we incentivize the local research using local minerals for our sustainability and cost, obviously. And third is how do we upskill the society, which is still left behind.
Right. Mr. Gulati, you've been on the policy corridors in your earlier stint. You understand government very well. And you've seen, the Indian automotive market transitioning through various governments and their approach towards the future. And you've seen many policies as well right in front of your eyes. 3 or key 4 imperatives that the Indian government could and state governments could take that could help in cleaning up the environment and move towards the net zero future.
So let me take it at logical flow. Any policy has to have a particular goal. What's the goal here? 2047 energy security, 2070 net zero carbon. Let that be clear.
These are 2
goals. Clear, right. Now, let's come to policy formulation. Logically, you look at the ground reality today. 4.2 million cars. Yes. 0.2 are addressed, perhaps. Right. Half by electrics, half by hybrids. 4 million cars are ICE. These cars are going to remain on the roads for 15 years. Right. 2030, let's do some projections. Let's say 6 million mark is something that we're going to hit. Let's say we're really going to push the buck and 20% is going to be EVs. So that's 1.2 taken care of. What is the balance? 4.8. From 4, we are going to 4.8. So 0.8 million is additional ICE of varied kind.
Which is going to run on fuel.
Which is going to run on fossil fuel. If you look at the park, it is projected around anything between 87 to 92% is going to be traditional ICE. So it's no wonder that IEA is projecting that by 2030, with all of these aspirational activities that we're doing, we are going to be increasing our fossil fuel imports, crude oil, by 1.2 million barrels per day.
And that's a growth of?
That's just crude oil import.
And which is a jump from current levels?
Which is going to be 30% of all additional fossil fuel demand creation.
Right.
So let these facts sink in. So let's go back to the first point. What are we trying to achieve? Carbon and fossil fuel. So there is no way on earth you can achieve that unless you also are clear on the following. One, whatever you have to do has to be at scale and speed. Second, you also have to address that balance 80%. Otherwise, 80% by 2030, 98% today, and certain percentage going forward. Now, this is a reality because this reality is drawn by consumer acceptance, our own unique energy mix, our challenges around infrastructure, which are deeper than just charging infrastructure, which are deeper rooted in reforms in electric system, supply, ecosystem, transmission, distribution, etc. We have to address it. There's no way. And I agree. We have to really push the buck for EVs. No two ways about it. Now, how do you address this? Everybody agreed here that the future is looking like a multiple technology future by 2030.
Yeah.
Then clearly, one goal, if you want to achieve these two objectives, is to make the consumer adopt a greener solution. Whatever it be. It can be gas, it can be ethanol, it can be electrified, or whatever it is. Now, how do you simplify this complexity? One OEM may want to do a certain mix, another may want to do another mix, third may want to do a third mix. A very complex, khichdi kind of an environment. How do you sort this out? Well, you sort this out by making your policy, most important policies, I'll take example of one, taxation, which are based on merit. Now, how do you do that? You can do that by just seeing what Europe is doing, what Southeast Asian countries are doing. They are simply fixed on the national goals, which is fossil fuel, and rewarding or punishing depending on that. Simple. So, base your taxation, GST, on carbon emission, which is a measure of the fuel consumption. It's not very complicated. You can do that. It's
so
something...
CO2-led taxation is what you're saying.
I want to be very clear. I'm not saying CO2 as in, carbon-based carbon taxation. Here you have to understand fuel efficiency or fuel consumption-based. Now, what that does is, just to very simply put it, a consumer, if he's buying a car, he is responsible for the kind of fuel consumption he's doing, carbon he's emitting, and pollution he's making. So this takes care of another aspect. The government doesn't have to keep paying from taxpayers' money to subsidize anything. It is a purely fee-based activity. If I choose a car which has a very poor mileage, I pay more tax. Simple. And this can be very easily, transparently determined because these data are reported. Now, is this something absolutely a brilliant idea? No. Thailand does it. 22 out of 29 EU countries do it, besides the CAFE regulation, in addition to it. This carbon taxation or fuel efficiency taxation is either on the side of procurement, purchase, or on the operation side. Now, I was very amazed. Last month, I went to Brazil. And what they're doing is really mind-boggling, because I really found it very scientific. They are taking their taxation a step further. What they've done is, what I'm talking about right now is basically tank to wheel, the efficiency of the vehicle. What they are doing now is taking taxation to the next level, which really makes a difference of carbon emission in a true sense. They are taking their taxation to well to wheel. And how they're doing it? They are measuring the efficiency of the vehicle in terms of energy efficiency. They have got government measurement for carbon intensity of all the fuels. Electricity, ethanol, gasoline, diesel, gas, everything. Between the two, they are now in their next policy, which comes up for approval this year, The taxation will be based upon the true impact you're having on the economy, on the environment. And I think that is the true way to be honestly addressing the issue of pollution, to be giving the consumer a cleaner choice. Because every consumer may not be able to adopt one technology or another technology or the other technology. It's incumbent for us to give them a choice which is cleaner, greener, and aligned to our national cause. Thanks.
Sometimes the thought process is that when we try and incentivize other technologies, the eventual North Star or the goal towards complete electrification, the narratives over there gets muddled and it's not understood very well with consumers as well. And plus, they have to pay extra money for the technology that they are paying. So sometimes, having too many, different technologies and having different incentives, that also kind of creates a difficulty.
No, I don't think so. I think if our North Star is electric, no two ways about it, give it the best policy treatment ever.
Right.
Give it the advantage that you want to give much more.
Right.
But the question here is not EV versus other. It is, let's say, an ICE within ICE. Now, let's say I'm buying a small car, its fuel efficiency is worse than a large car that you're buying.
Right.
Then should you be paying, should I be paying less tax? Currently, that's how it is.
Right.
So the question really is, how do you differentiate the good boys and the bad boys amongst the rest? That's the point. It's not EV versus any other powertrain. That's not the point.
Right.
The point really is, how do you allow the consumer? It's like I'll make it very simple to you. Today, you want to go and buy let's say, an air conditioner, right? You see a 5-star, you say this is efficient, and you say, okay, I want this, right? The salesman will tell you that this is 7,000 rupees more or whatever. Now, this 7,000 rupee, when you get the invoice, you will realize that the manufacturing and the bill of material cost, technology cost, may be certain portion. Certain portion is that fact that you're paying more tax on it. It's a fact. Go check it out.
Right.
The reason is there is no distinction on taxation today on efficiency and inefficiency. And we, sitting here, want to talk about carbon, we want to talk about fossil fuel reduction, we want to talk about energy efficiency. The two things must connect.
Right.
So this is a simple example. You can just go and check it out. That is what we need to do. Link our national goals to our policies in a transparent manner, and that will give you the innovation, that will allow for the market forces to play, and that will allow actually for the BEVs to take off faster. Because let's say if other electrified technologies start getting into the adoption curve much better than, let's say, ICE, there is a full electric powertrain. It may be lesser batteries, much, much less batteries, smaller motor, but it's still a battery, still a motor, still the entire ECUs that are getting demand. The demand gets built up.
Right.
So that's what I would say.
Right. Fantastic. Mr. Velusamy, yes.
Yeah, I agree with Gulati about the national goal. And one thing that we all should keep in mind is when the new energy vehicles in China introduced, there was a heavy subsidy for the purchase of the vehicles when it was about 1 or 2%.
Right.
Till it reached 15%, and then now it is 25%. Likewise, in Europe, you had 9,500 euros per vehicle. And then it came down to 6,500 euros, and then it came down to 4,500 euros, till it reached 14%. And likewise, you have a $7,500 in the US. Also, there is a heavy subsidy of how you do the battery electric vehicles development by the governments. All the subsidies are enabling, because on the ICE vehicle, you have a GST of 30% to 48%.
Right.
That's a GST. On the top of it, you have a road tax of 10% to 20%.
Right.
I mean, look at the amount of money that you put it on the ICE vehicle. And then you bring in CAFE norms, and then you say if you don't meet certain fleet average CO2 vehicles, then you need to pay penalty per vehicle. Now, on one side, the amount of CO2 reduction that is supposed to happen in the ICE vehicle is not happening. That is why we are struggling to meet the CAFE norms, right?
Right.
And we are saying only we will meet 15% reduction over 5 years. We are not ready to meet over 30% reduction. So that means inherently the ICE powertrain, whatever form it is, in many forms, flux fuels in many forms, it is not able to reduce the CO2 norms, and therefore we are asking, don't reduce the CO2 norms beyond 15% for over 5 years.
Right.
That means we should demand from the government that you have to kickstart the electric journey in order to have a drastic reduction in the CO2 norms, and get this current 3% to 15% and see whether how it naturally takes from there.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
And maybe it is giving a birth to range extenders with, instead of a 60, 70 kilowatt-hour battery, it is giving a, that's what happened in China, right? It gave a birth to the 30 kilowatt-hour battery pack with twice the range as the normal battery electric vehicles.
Right.
And that is reducing the CO2s. So we have to keep that open mind in order to push these new technologies forward. Otherwise, on one side, CAFE norms, the ICE vehicles are facing, or you reduce the taxation on the ICE vehicles,
right?
And that will allow us to pay something for the CAFE norms. If you don't subsidize the electric vehicles,
right? Let me come to one final question for each one of you. At the end of the day, the consumer is the king, and how would you pull consumers towards cleaner technology? There's a corporate responsibility, as there's a government responsibility of cleaning up the environment, but their purse strings are limited. And at the end of the day, a consumer wants to pay the lowest price for the best vehicle out there. How do you address the consumer challenge? I mean, we are in the business of narratives, and there are many narratives around, right? So from a consumer standpoint, what will it make consumer to choose a cleaner alternative, be it hybrid, be it EV, or be it hydrogen vehicle from a commercial vehicle standpoint? Mr. Velusamy, if I could get your views first.
So I at least in the last 5-6 years, I've seen how the customers react to each of the vehicles. There's a functional vehicle where customer is taking your purse and looking at all the features, and he is calculating company A, company B, C, D, and the brands, and then he is calculating whether start-stop is there, starting with that, and then panoramic sunroof, all the stuffs. He is calculating the value, and he is going to every dealership, and then checking the vehicles, and then coming back the best vehicle. That's functional value for money, correct? Right. But there is a love at first sight.
Right.
That's something the vehicles capture your emotions, not the person functional. And here the customer doesn't take out the purse.
Yeah.
And he just signs the check and tells, when are you going to deliver the vehicle? And that is something cult cadres, which we call it as, I want to name an example of Thor Rocks and Thor 3-door and our electric vehicles. There, does he see the price of the vehicle? Of course, he sees the price of the vehicle, but he is willing to pay it out because he wants to have it. Now, the cult can be created by the shape of the vehicle, by the richness and premiumness of the vehicle, and the technology that gives the status to the purchasers.
And at the price that he wants to pay.
At the end of the day, when the customer drives the vehicle, he wants to be seen around. And he wants to make a statement that he has arrived at. Why not? 70 years ago, we were talking about freedom. Today, we are talking about status. No more you want to be ignored in the middle of...
So create wow products is what you're saying.
Create wow products. Automatically, put in every medicine is sugar-coated. Like, you want the electric vehicles to sell, but don't try to sell the electric vehicle. But sugarcoat that with the technology.
The cost and the price conundrum, which is always a challenge. How do you make it more accessible?
The customer will find it. Once you have sold him emotionally, he will find it
affordable.
Yeah.
Affordable enough.
So I think that's a way to go. Bring the technology, mesmerize the customers, give him the comfort, give him the technology, give him the status, and tell him you are an international man today.
Right.
And with this vehicle, you are proud.
Right.
It's an Indian OEM who is making it for you, and
Right.
it's a proud moment for India. Bring it those aspects to him, and then obviously the electric will take off from there.
Right.
And it is a medicine inside the sophisticated one. That's how you use it. Yeah.
Right. Mr. Petkar, from a functional buyer to an aspirational buyer to a TCO buyer, you cater to all of them. So, and the needs are very different, budgets are different. I mean, how can consumer lap up, given the current cost and incentive dynamics that we have?
Yeah, so I think, so again, different category of the vehicle, there is a buying decision is made on certain considerations. So I fully agree with what Velu said, as far as the passenger cars are concerned, it is more like an emotional buying. And today when the customer is spoiled with the choice, either in terms of a technology options or in terms of the OEMs, number of OEMs which are there in the market. So therefore there is a choice to be made. I think it's more like an emotional buying that the customer
For
makes
passenger vehicles.
as far as the passenger cars are concerned. And as far as the commercial vehicles are concerned, it is purely on the basis of a TCO. I fully agree with what Mr. Mani also had said some time back. I think it's about the TCO because it's actually a means to earn the livelihood. And therefore this, the personalization and style, design, the interiors, all that jazziness, is something which is less of important as far as the commercial vehicles are concerned. It is more towards, how much I can earn more.
And there the challenge of price and infrastructure still is an issue for customers to accept, isn't it?
Yes.
How will they come in?
Yeah, so see, finally, if you look at from the commercial buyer's perspective, I think the acquisition cost is pretty important. Now, you can say my vehicle is, gives you 1.5 million kilometer of life, right? Durability. Now, who is there to see, So
Correct.
therefore, immediate, what matters to them is what is my cost of acquisition?
Price
What's the
sensitivity.
EMI I am paying, right? And is it affordable to me? And therefore, am I able to repay and therefore start earning money?
Subsidized interest rate for cleaner vehicles, just like probably how Mr. Gulati was talking about taxation. So probably link that
Actually,
to
it would help. It would help. And therefore, there is something called as the green financing.
green financing.
And the green financing actually is towards, having some kind of a subsidy or subsidization of the interest rate. So that actually helps as far as the commercial vehicle operators are concerned.
Right, Mr. Mani, you also cater to the TCO buyer and the EV buyer as well, where the price sensitivity is very critical. What will lead to the switch?
Well, having worked in both sectors, I could see a clear distinction though, but I would still believe that customers are emotionally still attached to a brand. There are players, 4 generations together, they are still attached to that. Point number one. But secondly, at the end of the day, they also, since the livelihood is actually connected to this project, so each and everyone really wants to see a dependence on the technologies. So the major responsibility of OEM is to, whenever we bring a new technology, how far we are assuring that the dependency on ICE is still going to continue. That's going to become a very important, important job for all of us to really convince them, whether it is ICE or EV or CNG or LNG or hydrogen ICE itself. So I think that they are playing a very important role. But one, and at the end of the day, as you rightly said, value for money is most important thing, which will always be at the bottom line. Even Petkar guys also keep thinking. They don't just like that, take the check and keep it in front, it's not happening that way also. But most important thing is, what I understand is that the technology understanding and imbibement of commercial vehicle buyers are much larger than what Petkar is all about.
Yes.
I'll give a data point on that. Whenever we always give a subscription, free subscription for 2 years for any high-end product, whatever we offer with 40, 50 features, as a consumer, as a Petkar guys, we hardly use 10 or 20 max. I think most of them are not even aware. Some of them do not even like it, geofencing, because of a lot of privacy aspects are concerned. Whereas 150,000 vehicle we done with connected car, connected truck.
Technology, yeah.
And they wanted to really subscribe back because they find a lot of value add, because it is actually livelihood. They are sitting, 50% of the still buyers are fleet owners.
Right.
So they still want to get connected to the product. So it's a mixed bag at the end of the day, but TOC is always a king, which we'll have to continue to work towards communicating and also making sure our products are always trouble-free. That's what Ashok Leyland has always been focusing on. Thank
Mr.
you.
Gulati, if I could bring you in, hybrid was non-existential almost 3 years back, and in no time it took off. What led to the shift, and what will make consumer move towards more cleaner vehicles?
So I think it's the value proposition, and I agree with what Mr. Velu said. It's about, the emotive connect that the consumer finds, but it's also about performance and convenience.
Is there a responsibility element that a consumer thinks?
Well, there should be, but I hope it's increasing in. It is also a correlation to the, the per capita income that you would have. So in markets like Europe, etc., it's very high. Right. In India, I think it's increasing, right. And I believe we'll continue to go in the right direction.
Right. Just one last question for each of the panelists. Put you on the spot. By 2030, each one of you, what is the kind of fuel mix that you see in the market from a passenger vehicle perspective?
I think clearly, to keep it very simple, multiple.
Any share that you'd like to share? What percentage EV, what percentage hybrid, what percentage?
In the VUCA world that we're in, it's it's fraught with danger to try to make any predictions.
Mr. Hazela?
I think it would be all of the above. So any proportion will be there, and it would be different for different kind of vehicle. But since we are very serious on this topic, I would like to just draw something else from Three Idiot. Electric car is the only one which can make the dream of Rancho true. Because electric car on the other side can charge. So imagine a world where a teacher goes for his, take a car from the home and go to a village where there is no electricity. She powers the lights, she powers the fan, teach the student and come back. That's the vision which we need to have it.
Mr. Mani, would you like to
give
us some guesses?
We have diesel generators still do the job. Having done that, so obviously electrification bus definitely a larger penetration. And
what share? I'm putting you on spot.
20 to 30%, of course, minimum. Primarily for multiple reasons. Because it's almost sauce-based has come into picture, except for conductor. Everything else is being provided by the OEMs themselves. So it's going to be a larger penetration, and maybe last mile connectivity a lot.
Hydrogen takes a while for it to.
It should take still experimental basis. Maybe a hubs comes into picture. We'll be the first one to grab on. Right. So by and large,
Mr. Murugappan. Okay. Mr. Petkar.
Yeah. So I think from my point of view, the multi-fuel scenario will continue. It is very difficult to assign the percentage because it's a function of so many parameters. Right, but I think one thing which is clear is that the ICE engines are not going to be dead by 2030. They will be there.
True.
Okay. So I think we will continue to see a very fascinating times across all technologies and fuel options.
Right.
I think even if you take 3% per year, we are talking about 15% growth for the battery electric vehicle, and already you have 3%, so 18-20% minimum you will hit it. So the 94% of ICE will come down.
Definitely come down.
But then there is a slowed growth, then full growth. About 75% will be ICE, and then 25% will be the battery electric vehicle. Right. That's how I read it.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. So there you go. Future is multi-pathway, and very difficult to guess as to what the numbers will be, but I mean, it is an engineer's conundrum that we have to work on all technologies for future, and hopefully consumers will bite the bait. Thank you very much for listening.